Welcome to the American Diversity Report podcast, where we interview the diverse movers and shakers and innovative change makers that will enlighten you and educate you. I'm Deborah Levine, your host, the editor-in-chief of the American Diversity Report. And with me today is Dr. Nika White. She is president of Nika White Consulting and the author of the Intentional Inclusionist. She has a Ph.D. in management and organizational leadership and is headquartered in Greenville, South Carolina. Her book shares strategies for becoming an inclusion-minded leader. It features principles and philosophies that help individuals better understand diversity and inclusion and be more intentional in their practice at the individual level. Welcome, Nika.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
A pleasure. So I'm curious, how did you get involved in the issues of diversity and inclusion in the first place?
That's a great question, and it's actually a pretty interesting narrative behind it. At the time, I didn't realize that I was always drawn to this work, but what really brought it to light was, my background is marketing communications, and I spent about 15 or so years working in that discipline. And maybe about halfway through my tenure working in that discipline, I remember sitting in my office and I had this epiphany that I could not let go. I was so pleased to be working in an industry that I truly had passion for. I love the dynamics of marketing communications, and I was working in an advertising agency at the time. And I love the fast-paced dynamics of it. I love the culture of the agency. I was really appreciative of the clients I was able to work with. And I thought I was in my element and that I was going to continue to work in that capacity for the long haul. And I remember sitting in my office thinking one day how much I enjoyed my work. And I started to reflect on the fact that why aren't there others that look like me that's taking advantage of this wonderful career path so they can be able to enjoy this work as much as I do? And as an African-American female, I honestly could not let that go, especially when you couple that with the notion that those who work in an advertising agency or marketing communications professionals, you are working with clients whose consumer constituencies represent diverse America, which means that you need to have those different perspectives at the table so that you can be effective marketing partners to your clients. And, the agency that I was working with at the time, their efforts around diversity and inclusion were pretty non-existent. There certainly was not a level of intentionality around the work. And so I saw it as an opportunity. And I remember going to the president CEO at the time, who was very hands-on with the agency, and I had a good rapport with him. And I kind of shared this epiphany, and I told him that there was a business case for it. At the time, the agency was really looking to become the most admired agency in the Southeast, and I knew that the agencies that were located in like New York and Chicago, the advertising capitals of the world, they were certainly being pressured to diversify the workforce, but of course no one was really seeking out the agencies in Greenville, South Carolina. And so, there was an opportunity for us to take the lead and to, at the organizational level, to become more intentional about creating inclusion as an opportunity for us to become smarter, more effective marketing partners to our clients. And the president CEO listened to my story, and he agreed and said, okay, that's great. I understand it. We're going to do it, and you're going to lead it. Now tell us how. And then I, pretty much had to become really smart really quick on the work of inclusion. And what I did was I surrounded myself with people that were already well accomplished in that space and that discipline. And we began to collectively start to execute operationally with the lens of inclusion. And we fumbled sometimes, but we eventually were able to get a stride about ourselves and gain some traction and momentum. And the rest is history. That's where I kind of saw that I was really drawn to the work. And then I started serving in a dual role where I was management supervisor, still working on client services end, but also I was diversity and inclusion manager as well.
That's a lot of work.
Yes.
You must have been very busy. And how long ago was this?
So let's see, I've been in my existing role now for maybe the past 5 years. And so it was 2012 that I actually transitioned from that role into the space that I'm in now. But again, the latter part of being in an advertising agency environment as an employee, I was, serving as diversity and inclusion manager. So in addition to, again, the client services role. So yeah, I did not set out to do the work of diversity and inclusion. This pathway kind of found me, but once I was able to start operating in the discipline, I really felt that I was really facilitating a purpose that I was really drawn to. And so I really do see this now as part of what I have been created to do in the world, is to help foster inclusion and help people to become intentional inclusionists and grow as inclusion-minded leaders.
And so that's how your book came to be, is that right?
Yes. And so when I transitioned from this advertising agency, I didn't know it at the time, but the local Chamber of Commerce in my market, Greenville, South Carolina, they were creating a new position with VP of Diversity and Inclusion. And I had a trusted mentor that said to me, Nika, you need to look at this. It seems like it's very much in your wheelhouse. And I ended up pursuing it, and the rest is history. I got the position. They did a national search. I was the lucky beneficiary right in their backyard. And I really built that program from scratch. And that was really a very interesting and rewarding experience for me, because it allowed me to have a larger platform around this work of inclusion that was able to impact the community at large, and not just very situated to a client here or there. And my responsibility was to create this overarching strategic plan for the organization, and to do so looking internally at the operations of the organization, as well as externally, how we could deliver upon our leadership in the space of diversity and inclusion. And we had our work cut out for us, but with a lot of great support and help, we were able to create some pretty quick milestones we were able to achieve, and use that to build momentum for some larger projects and successes that we've been able to realize. So it's been quite the journey.
Yes, and I gather that your book is based on experience, and it's not just theoretical.
That's absolutely correct. I always say that I'm not a surface diversity and inclusion practitioner. I really believe in getting to the crux of the matter. I believe in not just, knowledge transfer, but helping people to internalize that knowledge to the point where they're moved to action, and that they are able to move with speed and passion and power, and with the intent of seeing success be realized as a result of leveraging the opportunity that diversity and inclusion brings to all types of environments. And so this book was a labor of love. I really felt the need to kind of capitalize on some of the experiences that I was fortunate to have, and some of the information that I was exposed to through my journey around this work, and to share those principles and practices with others. It's really a book for leaders, and I define leaders as just people of influence. And I think that oftentimes when you think about the work of diversity and inclusion, many people will conclude that that work is for the large corporations with really deep pockets and a chief diversity officer. But the point that I wish to make through the book is to help people to realize that we each have a level of influence within our circles and our networks, that we can create meaningful opportunity for people to dialogue and to be educated around inclusion and the opportunity that it brings. And so really it's appealing to leaders at the individual level, and helping them to think more intently about their influence to create the inclusion in the world in which they would like to see, and in which I believe that the world deserves.
It sounds wonderful. Can you give us an example of your advice to individuals who are leaders and influential, what they might do?
Sure. So one of the chapters in the book, there are actually 12 principles, and one of the chapters in the book, it deals with following your curiosity. And something that I always hear people say, particularly individuals that are very well-intended, is that, they believe in the work of inclusion. They know the value of it. They just don't know how to facilitate that. And part of what I challenge the readers, the leaders to do as they encounter this content in the book is to really follow their curiosity. We all have different areas of life that we are curious about. And so I want people to be curious about the human difference and what those differences are and what they mean in terms of interacting with people that are different from us. And in order to follow that curiosity, it certainly takes a level of boldness so that you're willing to engage in productive dialogue in a safe space environment where we can extend grace and accept grace, recognizing that people are really following their curiosity for the benefit of learning about the differences. Because I think that if we can learn about the differences, we have a greater appreciation and greater understanding of how we may be able to leverage and harness those differences for better outcomes. And so, that looks like being willing to seek out the webinars, the conferences, the consultants, the books, and to learn about different cultures and different differences that exist among people in general. I believe that part of the work of an intentional inclusionist is to take responsibility for effectively managing human difference within those relationships that we have. And so follow your curiosity is kind of one of those things that I highlight as a very simple yet impactful way to lead with the lens of inclusion. We have to educate.
Exactly. We are in the midst of tremendous change here in American society, and certainly here in the South as we welcome so many national and international businesses. What do you expect to have happen around the issue of inclusion in the next few years?
Great question, Deborah. And, I really want the message in this book to spark a movement whereby people do begin to, take the responsibility of creating this inclusion in the world. So whether it's within their families, their homes, their marketplace, the different civic and community organizations and affiliations in which they have, that they begin to execute and interact in a way that helps to foster inclusion. And that takes a great deal of forethought. The reason that I am a big fan of the word intentional, and I, very deliberately titled the book The Intentional Inclusionist, is that it takes a level of intentionality. It takes us to quiet our egos and to be curious and to be willing to put forth the effort and the work in order to see the benefits of diversity and inclusion realized. And, being intentional looks a certain way. It's very calculated. It's very deliberate. It's putting forth the forethought and the planning and being very mindful and self-aware. And I think that all of those are characteristics of self-leadership that can lead to wonderful benefits, particularly as it relates to the work of inclusion. So I just hope that people will see this as a way to become inspired, to become intentional inclusionists, and that in and of itself will create this movement whereby we are, as a society, taking more of the responsibility at the individual level and then collectively together to create the inclusion in which we desire to see.
Well, it sounds beautiful, and I'm wondering, maybe there are lots of individuals out there who could benefit from this, not just leaders. Do you do anything with young people?
No, I do. So I do a lot of speaking to different groups. I have had the privilege of being able to speak to large groups, small, intimate groups around different topics that are relevant to inclusion, diversity, or leadership in general. And that's important to me because I always intersect leadership into the conversation, because I view being inclusion-minded as a leadership function. And I think this is a message that certainly resonates across different age groups and different demographics. And so I always welcome the opportunity to be able to help educate our young people around the work of inclusion. Interestingly enough, we're finding that the younger generations, they value inclusion a whole lot more than some of the other generations. And so I think that we can learn a lot also from, the younger population. but, so the opportunity to really engage in this work, I think that, part of, getting the message out is to leverage those speaking opportunities. And so whenever I have a chance to do so, I certainly accommodate my schedule to be able to talk around this topic. I intentionally made the book an easy, digestible read. It's about 100 pages. And, outside of the initial introduction that kind of sets the tone, there are 12 different principles that's introduced. And I did that because part of the opportunity would be that, maybe an organization will see fit to bring me in to share concepts of the book with employees within that organization. And then maybe there's some kind of lunch and learn over the course of a year to where each month we take one of those principles and really try to have deeper dialogue around them. So, there are lots of ways to engage with this message. There's also a Facebook group that was established. It's called the Intentional Inclusionist movement. And when I first published the book, I started that group because it's a way for people that are already engaged around this conversation to, in a safe space environment, to be able to exchange thoughts, ideas, perspectives around different topics that fall under the umbrella of inclusion. And so I welcome anyone to, join that Facebook group if you're interested.
Thank you. Do you find that there's a particular question or set of questions that come up frequently when you go out to speak like this?
That's interesting, but it really is all across the board. I customize and tailor every speaking opportunity to the audience and the objectives. And, the topic of diversity and inclusion is very broad. I mean, because it's extremely broad, and there's so many different dimensions of diversity. I think that part of the education piece that's become really critical is helping people to become more sophisticated in the way in which they talk and think about and define diversity and inclusion. It's not just about age, race, and gender. It's much, much more broad than that. And so part of my my desire is to help people to think broader about diversity and inclusion, and not just cull it down to some of those dimensions that we optically can see, but also think about the other invisible dimensions of diversity and how we can, again, make sure that we are including those individuals where appropriate, even when we don't necessarily know exactly what all those differences are. It's just a matter of engaging people in a way that helps them to realize their full potential and contribute at a high level.
And what would some of those not visible categories be?
Well, so for example, we all have different learning styles. I think about in the education world, oftentimes, people are, facilitating or transferring knowledge based upon maybe how in which they like to receive information, but maybe we don't take the moment to really ponder and think, well, people learn in different ways. That's a point in respect in which people differ. It's how in which they learn and like to receive information. Another would be the fact that the experiences that we all have, that brings a dimension of difference into an equation, particularly when you're trying to form work groups and teams. You want to make sure that you are not picking people that have similar backgrounds, because oftentimes those individuals may have similar perspectives, which does not give you the layers that you need to make sure that you are introducing to the conversation, to the problem-solving opportunity or the innovation opportunity, the ability to have, different thought processes, surface. So perspectives and experience is something that we don't always see, but it's incredibly important. There are a lot of individuals that have invisible disabilities. It could be maybe some type of mental struggle. It could be that, I'll take, for example, myself, and I like to use this as an example. People were to physically look at me, optic-wise, they will see that I am, pretty healthy individual with all of my limbs working, but the reality is that I don't see very well in my right eye, but looking at me, you don't know that. But that's a difference. That's a point in which I may differ from a lot of my peers or others that may be in my circle. And so, while that's just a small example, the point is that there's so much about us that, we don't take the time to really peel back the layers. And so we oftentimes just gravitate towards those differences that we can see. But we have to make sure that we're also very cognizant of the fact that there's so many invisible differences that also helps us to show up the way that we do. And if we're not careful to somehow, try to learn what those differences are and that we can find ourselves not being quite as effective in interacting and building relationships the way that we want to.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Having a few of those myself.
Yeah.
Many of us do. Many of us do. So tell me, before we finish, how do people get your book so they can benefit from it?
Sure. So my book, again, titled The Intentional Inclusionist, Grow as an Inclusion-Minded Leader is really the premise of the book. It is available on Amazon. One great way to actually stay connected with me and to learn more about some of the speaking engagements and more of the principles that are found in the book is you could go to my website, which is nikawhite.com. That's Nika White, just like the color. And there is a product page on my website that takes you directly to the link on Amazon where you can order the book. And I would love to hear your feedback. You can do a review once you've ordered the book. And just kind of let me know what you think and how in which you feel like this information may impact you and the circles in which you have influence. But I would love to connect with anyone around this topic. And again, there is that Facebook page. It's called the Intentional Inclusionist Movement. And you can go in and ask to join that group. And I will be glad to accommodate and have you to be a part of the discussion.
Well, I'll look forward to doing that. Thank you so much. I appreciate all that you do and sharing it with us today. Is there any last minute things that you would like to say before we wrap up?
I just want to thank you, Deborah. I appreciate the work that you're doing and the platform that you're giving so many people that are interested in seeing this work to materialize in different communities. And I just want to thank you for your leadership and for the opportunity to share.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's my pleasure and my work of a lifetime, as it is for you also. So thank you so much, Dr. Nika White. And thank you, audience, for listening. And we encourage you to order the book and participate. Thanks again.